The judge was about to dismiss some of my evidence when Leah stood up. "Your Honor, the real will has not yet been presented to the court." The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Leah walked forward with the will in her hands. The original. The one my father had written himself in his own handwriting, 3 months before he died. The fingerprints were my father's. The handwriting was authenticated. The witnesses were solid and credible. Tara's face went completely white. The judge examined the document carefully. He looked at the date. He compared the handwriting to other examples of my father's writing. He read my father's letter to me, the one where he explained that someone was manipulating him. "This is highly irregular," the judge said. "Where was this document?" "In a safe deposit box," Leah explained. "My client's father hid it specifically because he was concerned that someone was forging documents in his name." I watched Tara falling apart in real time. Her confident smirk was gone. Her perfect appearance was cracking. She looked small and desperate and afraid. Leah introduced Victoria next. Tara's sister. Tara's own blood. And Victoria told the entire court about a grandmother. About forged signatures practiced years ago. About a pattern of fraud that went back decades. The courtroom erupted. Victoria was a powerful witness. She had photographs. She had dates. She had a lifetime of guilt for not reporting her sister sooner. And she had nothing to lose by telling the truth. "She did this to our grandmother," Victoria said, her voice steady and clear. "She took money. She forged documents. When my grandmother tried to report it, Tara told everyone that grandma had dementia. She destroyed her reputation. And when I realized what she'd done, I was too afraid to report it. I've carried that guilt for 15 years. I'm not going to stay quiet anymore." The judge's expression had changed completely. He was no longer polite and neutral. He was angry. Angry at Tara. Angry at the fraud. Angry at the systematic way she'd targeted vulnerable people. Tara tried to cry. She tried to look devastated. But it didn't work anymore. Because now the judge could see through the act. He could see a pattern. He could see a predator. Her lies crumbled one after another. The testimonies she'd paid for didn't matter anymore. The story she'd crafted so carefully fell apart like a house built on sand. On the stand, facing the truth, Tara finally broke. The judge listed every single charge. Every count of fraud. Every forged signature. Every stolen dollar. Inheritance fraud. Signature manipulation. Misappropriation of funds. Tax fraud. The list went on and on. Tara collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Real tears this time. Not the practiced tears of someone acting for a jury. Real broken, desperate tears. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Tara looked at me. Her eyes were destroyed. Her face was destroyed. Her entire life was collapsing in real time. "Please," she whispered. "I didn't mean, Ellie, please. I didn't mean to." She was begging. Begging for mercy. Begging for me to take back my accusations. Begging for me to make this stop. I could have felt satisfied. I could have felt victorious. I could have smiled while she suffered. But I didn't. I just felt tired. "I want justice," I said quietly. "Nothing more." The judge looked at me with something like respect in his eyes. "I won everything. Cabin. The savings. The entire estate. Plus damages that would be paid by Tara. She was ordered to repay every penny she'd stolen, plus interest. She faced criminal charges that would likely result in jail time. Tara's life was destroyed. Her reputation was destroyed. Her marriage was destroyed. Thomas had disappeared the moment it became clear that they were both going to prison. Her family had turned against her. Victoria had made sure of that with her testimony. I walked out of the courthouse on a spring afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in months. The sun was warm on my face. The sky was blue. The world looked the same, but I looked different. I didn't smile at Tara's downfall. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate her suffering. I simply breathed, knowing that I had honored my father. knowing that I had done the right thing, knowing that I had fought for justice, not for revenge. My father's cabin waited for me. His savings were secure. His legacy was protected. And his memory was finally safe from someone who had tried to destroy it. I got in my car and drove toward the future I'd earned through patience, preparation and courage. Tara had underestimated me. She'd thought I was weak. But she was wrong. I wasn't weak. I was prepared. And that made all the difference. Father's actual handwriting. The other half were obvious forgeries once you knew what to look for. The pressure of the pen was different, the angle was wrong, the letters didn't flow the same way. Your cousin is a clever forger, Dr. Yates told me in Leah's office. But she's not a professional. She tried to copy your father's signatures from old documents, but she didn't account for the changes in his writing due to age and illness. She was working from documents that were 10 years old. His handwriting had evolved. I felt something shift inside me. Confusion was turning into clarity. All those documents, the ones that had looked so real, so legitimate, the ones that had convinced my family and my boss and everyone else, were actually frauds. Tara had made a mistake. Multiple mistakes. And now I had proof. But it got worse for her. Leah discovered that Tara had access to old documents signed by my father. Medical forms. Bank documents. Letters. Things that were legitimately signed by him years ago. She'd used them as templates. She'd studied his signature and tried to replicate it on new documents. It was a paper trail of premeditation. Leah presented the evidence to me on a Friday afternoon. I found something. Look at this. She showed me photographs from Tara's computer. Photographs that Tara had apparently sent to a friend. They showed my father's old signatures printed out on paper, with notes written next to them. Arrows pointing to specific letters. Circles around particular pen strokes. Tara had literally been studying how to forge my father's handwriting. When did she take these? I whispered. A year ago, Leah said. She was planning this for a year. Maybe longer. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated, deliberate, premeditated fraud. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Tara hadn't just stolen from my father. She'd planned it. She'd studied for it. She'd gone to the bank multiple times with my unconscious father and witnesses who were in on the scheme. She'd forged documents knowing exactly what she was doing. We're going to destroy her, Leah said quietly. She won't see it coming. 3 days before the trial, I received a phone call from an unknown number. It was a woman's voice, shaky and urgent. Is this Ellie? The woman asked. Yes. Who is this? My name is Victoria. I'm Tara's estranged sister. I don't even know why I'm calling you, except that I can't let her do this to another person. She's done this before. With our grandmother. She stole money and documents, and when our grandmother tried to report it, Tara convinced everyone that Grandma had dementia. She destroyed her reputation. My blood ran cold. She did this before. That's not all, Victoria said. I have photographs. From years ago. Tara was practicing forging signatures. Our grandfathers, our fathers, our grandmothers. I found them when we were cleaning out our parents' house. I kept them because I thought I might need them someday. I think someday is now. Victoria came to Leah's office the next day. She brought a folder full of photographs. In each one, Tara had written notes in the margins. Practicing. Studying. Learning how to copy other people's signatures well enough to fool people. She's been doing this for years, Victoria said, her voice sad and angry at the same time. I should have reported it. I should have stopped her. But she's my sister. I didn't want to believe she was capable of this. What Leah uncovered next was bigger than the inheritance fraud. She found evidence of tax fraud. Hidden credit card debt in my father's name. Money being funneled through his accounts to accounts Tara controlled. This wasn't just about forged documents anymore. This was a full-scale financial crime. We're talking about felony-level charges, Leah said, her eyes intense. This goes beyond civil court. If we build this right, Tara could face criminal charges. I thought about my father. I thought about how vulnerable he'd been. How sick. How easy it must have been to manipulate him. "We're going to court," Leah said. "And she won't see it coming." Tara showed up at the pre-trial meeting with a smug smile and new lawyers. Expensive lawyers. The kind that cost serious money. Money that she'd stolen from my father, probably. Her lead attorney was a tall man in an expensive suit named David something. He had the confidence of someone who'd never lost a case. He sat across from Leah and me with his hands folded on the table. "My client is willing to settle," he said. "We understand there's been some confusion about your father's wishes. She's willing to offer you the cabin and the furniture from the study. Everything else stays with Tara." Cabin. My father's favorite place in the entire world. And just furniture. That was what they thought I wanted. That was the insult they were offering me. "No," I said. David blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry. Tell Tara no. Tell her I'm going to court. Tell her I'm going to take everything back. Tell her that she underestimated me, and it was the biggest mistake of her life." Tara's face went white. She leaned over and whispered something to her attorney. He nodded and stood up. As we were leaving, Tara grabbed my arm. Her fingernails dug into my skin. "You'll regret going against me," she hissed. "I promise you that." I looked at her coldly. "I don't think so." The courtroom was bigger than I expected. Cold and formal and intimidating. Tara sat at the defense table in a dress that looked expensive and sad, carefully chosen to make her look vulnerable. Her attorneys sat on either side of her like bodyguards. The testimonies were devastating to listen to. Tara's attorney brought witness after witness to claim that my father had been lucid and aware when he signed the documents. That he'd told them he trusted Tara more than me. That he'd said he wanted her to have control of his estate. But they were all lying. I could see it in their faces. They were reciting lines that Tara had fed them. Then Tara took the stand. She was perfect. She cried at exactly the right moments. She said she'd only wanted to help. She said she was devastated by these accusations. She looked at me with sad eyes and shook her head like I was breaking her heart. For a moment I thought it was working. I watched the judge's face and saw something shift. I saw doubt creeping in. I felt the case slipping away from me like sand through my fingers. My stomach twisted. Had I traveled all this way just to lose? Leah squeezed my hand. "Just wait," she whispered. 3 days later I was sitting in HR at work. My boss looked uncomfortable. Tara's complaint had reached them. "We take harassment very seriously," he said, avoiding my eyes. "And we're concerned about the allegations she's made. We're going to need you to take some time off while we investigate." "Investigate what?" "Yes. I haven't done anything." "That's what we're trying to determine," he said. And then he told me I needed to leave the office immediately. My access card was being deactivated. My computer was being locked. I had been put on administrative leave, pending investigation. My whole life was collapsing. My job, my reputation, my inheritance. Everything was crumbling, and Tara was standing at the center of it all, smiling. I called Monica in tears. She listened for a minute, then said, "Leah. Call Leah Mitchell right now. Tell her everything." That night, I sat across from Leah in her office. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and an expression that didn't take nonsense from anyone. "She's playing offense while you're playing defense," Leah said after I finished telling her everything. "But that changes now. I need to ask you something important. Did your father ever mention a safe deposit box?" "Safe deposit box?" Question seemed random. I don't think so." "Why?" "Because that's where people keep the things they really want to protect," Leah said. "The documents they don't want other people to find." I searched my father's house that weekend. I went through his desk, his nightstand, his closet, his filing cabinets. Nothing. No keys, no boxes, no hints about a safe deposit box. But my father had loved old books. His entire study was lined with them. He'd spent hours in that room reading, sometimes falling asleep with a book open on his chest. I started pulling books from the shelves, one by one, checking inside. Most of them were empty. But when I pulled down his favorite, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that he'd read at least 5 times, something fell out. Tiny brass key. Small enough to fit in my palm. My hands started shaking. I didn't know what this key opened, but I knew it meant something. My father had hidden it in his favorite book. He'd kept it safe on purpose. The next morning I went to his bank and asked if he had a safe deposit box. He did. And with the key my father had hidden, I opened it. Inside was a manila envelope. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I carefully pulled out the contents. There were documents, photographs, and most importantly, there was a handwritten letter in my father's familiar handwriting. The letter that would change everything. My father's handwriting was shaky, the handwriting of someone whose hands didn't work quite right anymore. But it was definitely his. He wrote in his careful, deliberate way, the way he'd always written. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, then Tara has probably already made her move. I want you to know something, Ellie. Someone has been manipulating me, taking advantage of me, making me sign documents I don't remember, making me feel confused and small. There is a woman who pretends to be family, who visits when I'm tired, who brings me food that makes me sleepy, who whispers to me that nobody else cares. I tried to stop her. I tried to write this down. I don't know if I'll remember any of this by the time you read it. But I want you to know, I love you. I want you to have everything. I was crying by the time I finished reading it. My father had known. He'd known what Tara was doing. He'd known he was being manipulated, but the manipulation was so complete, so constant, that he couldn't fight it alone. But he'd found a way to fight back. He'd left this letter. And he'd left something else. The real will was tucked underneath the letter. It was dated 3 months before his death, when he was still healthy, when his mind was still clear. It named me as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. Every penny, every property, everything. And Tara wasn't mentioned at all. I sat in Leah's office 3 days later. The real will spread out on her desk between us. This is exactly what we need, Leah said, her eyes scanning the document. Your father was clearly of sound mind when he wrote this. The date, the handwriting, his mental clarity in the letter. It all points to him being lucid and aware. So we'll win, I asked, hope rising in my chest. Leah looked up at me, and her expression was serious. We have an excellent case. But she will attack this. She will question its authenticity. She will bring in experts. She will do everything in her power to make people doubt it. We need more than a will. We need a story. We need evidence that shows exactly what she did and how she did it. That afternoon, I received notice that Tara had filed more paperwork. This time, she was accusing me of financial exploitation of my father. She claimed I'd been pressuring him to change his will. She had false witnesses ready to testify. Leah's jaw tightened when she read it. She's getting desperate. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes. Tara's new strategy was vicious. She painted me as a terrible daughter. She brought up my long work hours, the years I'd been focused on my career, the weekends I didn't visit. She implied that I'd abandoned my father in his time of need. And then she implied that I'd taken advantage of his loneliness to pressure him into changing his will. The smear campaign spread through my family like poison. Emails appeared in everyone's inboxes with screenshots of messages I'd supposedly sent. Posts appeared online, carefully written to make me look like the villain in my own story. My own family members started doubting me. But Leah was building something too. A week before the court date, she called me with news. We found something. Tara didn't just forge one signature. She forged multiple signatures. On multiple documents. Her handwriting analysis shows at least 6 instances of signature forgery. 6. My voice cracked with something that felt like hope. How is that possible? Because she panicked, Leah said. After the first forged document, she needed to cover her tracks. She needed to make it look like there were multiple real documents. So she forged more. Each one was slightly different. Each one was a mistake. The handwriting expert Leah hired was a woman named Dr. Patricia Yates. She spent weeks analyzing the documents. Her report was, I was standing in the supply closet looking for printer paper when the tears came. Not quiet tears. Real, choking, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep inside me. All the emotion I'd held back while planning the funeral, while sitting with my family, while listening to Tara's lies. It all came pouring out at once. My coworker Monica found me there. She was reaching for paper towels when she saw me falling apart. Oh honey, she said softly. She didn't try to fix it or make me stop. She just sat down on the floor next to me and let me cry. When I finally stopped shaking, she asked me the question that nobody else had asked. Are you okay? The honesty came pouring out. The inheritance, the forged documents, the feeling of being completely helpless. Of having my father's legacy stolen by someone who laughed while doing it. Monica listened to everything. And when I finished, she said something that planted the first seed of hope in my chest. If someone took something from you, you can fight it. You don't have to let them win. I didn't believe her yet. But I wanted to. Monica introduced me to her husband's business lawyer during lunch the next day. His name was Mr. Garrett, and he sat across from me in a quiet coffee shop with his hands folded on the table. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. I told him about the documents, the dates, my father's condition, the family's reaction. I told him about Tara's coldness and her cruelty. When I finished, Mr. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said words I hadn't heard in days. You have options. You might have a real case here. Really? Hope fluttered in my chest like a bird with broken wings. Maybe. But you need to be smart about this, he said, leaning forward. Don't confront her. Don't let her know you're looking into this. Document everything. Every piece of evidence. Every conversation. Every feeling you had in that moment. Build quietly. And then when you're ready, you go for the knockout. He gave me the name of an attorney who specialized in inheritance fraud. A woman named Leah Mitchell who had a reputation for winning cases like mine. That night, Tara texted me. You better not be talking to anyone. My blood ran cold. Had she been watching me? But beneath the fear, something else was growing. Anger. And for the first time since my father died, it didn't feel hopeless. I spent the next week obsessively checking my father's bank records. What I found made my hands shake. Thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, had been transferred from his main account to an unfamiliar account that I'd never seen before. The transfers had started happening 6 months ago, slowly at first, then faster and faster as my father got sicker. Pure panic flooded through me. This wasn't just about the inheritance documents. This was about stolen money. Real money that had actually left the bank. But then panic gave way to something colder and sharper. Anger. Real focused anger. Called the bank. I need to know who authorized these transfers, I said. The representative put me on hold for what felt like forever. When she came back, her voice was careful and professional. Mrs. Waters, these transfers were all authorized by your father. There was a witness present at the bank for each transaction. A witness. My mouth went dry. Who? It says here. She paused. Thomas Waters. He's listed as a co-signer on the account. Thomas Waters. Tara's husband. A man I'd met maybe twice in my entire life. A man who my father barely knew. I sat in my car in the parking lot, holding my phone, and realized what I was dealing with. This wasn't just one person acting alone. This was coordinated. This was planned. This was a scheme designed by two people working together to steal everything from a sick, vulnerable man. And it had worked perfectly. Till now. Who was the witness at the bank? I asked when I called the bank back. I was in my car, my hands steady on the steering wheel, my voice controlled. The representative checked again. Thomas Waters. He's listed as the witness for all 3 transactions. Thomas Waters, Tara's husband, the man who barely knew my father. I felt the pieces clicking together in my head. If Tara had forged the inheritance documents, then Thomas was helping her. If Thomas was helping her steal money from the bank, then they were working together. Which meant this was bigger than I'd thought. This was a crime. I requested security footage from the bank, the dates the transfers happened. Days later, I sat in a cafe with my laptop and watched the video. There was my father, pale and thin, looking confused. There was Thomas, hovering next to him, pointing at documents. And in the background, just out of focus, I could see Tara. My father's hand was shaking as he signed. But the real shock came when I checked the hospital records against the bank dates. On the day of the 3rd transfer, my father had been admitted to the hospital. Not leaving the hospital. Not admitted earlier. Admitted that same day. There was security footage from the hospital showing him unconscious in his bed. He couldn't have been in 2 places at once. He couldn't have been signing documents at the bank if he was lying unconscious in a hospital room. Unless the dates were wrong. Unless the documents weren't real. Unless everything Tara had told me was a lie. I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly. Determination. Focused, cold determination. I confronted Tara with the footage. I drove to her house on a Friday evening and showed her the video on my phone. I expected panic. I expected her to break down or confess or at least look scared. Instead, she smirked. "Hospitals aren't perfect, Ellie," she said, barely looking at the phone. "You can't prove when he signed anything. That footage could be from any day. Your father was in and out of the hospital multiple times. And honestly, nobody's going to care. The documents are signed. The bank confirms it. You're the only person making accusations." She was right. She was infuriatingly right. And she knew it. That night, I received notice that a complaint had been filed against me. Tara had accused me of harassment. She said I was making false accusations, spreading lies, and trying to ruin her reputation. She wanted a restraining order. I read the complaint twice, then set my phone down and stared at the wall. Tara had just played her ace card. She'd turned me into the criminal. And she'd done it so smoothly, so perfectly, that the law was now protecting her from me instead of protecting my father's estate from her. I called Leah Mitchell that night. The inheritance documents felt heavy in Tara's hands as she waved them in front of me. We were standing in my father's study, the room that still smelled like his cologne mixed with old books. My father had been dead for exactly 3 days. 3 days, and already she was laughing. Not a kind laugh. A cruel, triumphant laugh that made my skin crawl. "I stole it because you're weak," Tara whispered, leaning in close. Her eyes gleamed with something I'd never seen before. Pure satisfaction. The folder dropped onto the desk with a soft thud. My cabin. My father's savings. Everything he'd promised me. Heat rose from my chest to my face. My hands trembled as the reality crashed over me like a wave. Tara watched my reaction like it was entertainment, like my pain was the best gift she could receive. My vision blurred with tears and fury. I'd never felt anger like this before. Sharp and hot and all-consuming. "My name is Ellie," I whispered, my voice steady despite everything falling apart inside me. "And I swear this isn't the end." Before I continue, I type in the comment section where you are from and thanks for subscribing to my channel. I didn't know then how much I meant those words. I didn't know what I would do or how far I would go to make things right. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tara had made a mistake thinking I was weak. Let me take you back to where this all started, the day before the study ambush. I was entering my father's house after his funeral, still wearing the black dress that felt too tight and too cold. The funeral had been that morning. 4 hours of watching people cry, hug, and tell stories about a man they barely knew. I'd held myself together the entire time. When I stepped through the front door, the grief hit me all at once. The house smelled like him. It looked like him lived here. Photos lined the hallway. Dad at the beach, Dad laughing, Dad holding me when I was 5 years old. Every single memory was staring at me from the walls. The cousins were there, hovering around the kitchen like awkward shadows. Some I recognized, some I didn't. They offered me casseroles and sad smiles. But Tara, my father's cousin who I'd only met a handful of times, moved through the house like she owned it. She reorganized the coffee cups. She adjusted the photos on the shelf. She walked into rooms without knocking. I noticed her fake sympathy slip when she thought nobody was looking. Her smile would disappear. Her eyes would go cold. And then she'd hear footsteps and turn it back on, the caring daughter act clicking into place like a mask. I was standing in the hallway, holding a plate of untouched food, when I watched Tara slip into my father's study. She closed the door quietly behind her. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that meant she didn't want anyone to know she was there. I heard the lock click into place. My stomach sank. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I walked to the study door and knocked. 3 sharp raps. "Tara, are you in there?" "Just organizing some things," she called back. Her voice was cheerful, but something underneath it sounded sharp. "Your father asked me to help. Nothing for you to worry about." Nothing for me to worry about. My father had been in the hospital for the last week of his life, unconscious most of the time. He barely recognized me when I visited. But somehow, he'd asked Tara to organize things. I pressed my ear against the door. I could hear papers being shuffled. The sound of a drawer opening and closing. Pen being uncapped. My heart started racing without me understanding why. A sinking dread formed in my stomach, heavy and cold. When Tara finally opened the door 5 minutes later, I pushed past her and looked at my father's desk. The drawers, which had always been locked, which my father kept locked for as long as I could remember, were now hanging open. Papers were scattered across the wooden surface. A pen lay on top of them, uncapped, the ink still wet on the tip. Tara watched me notice. She watched my face change. And then she smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Your dad trusted me more than you," she said quietly. "Always has." I turned to face her, my mouth dry. "What did you do?" The document I found was dated 3 days before my father died. 3 days. But during that week, my father had been in the hospital. I'd been there with him. I watched the nurses bring him medication that made him sleep. I watched his eyes struggle to stay open. I held his hand while he drifted in and out of consciousness. There was no way my father had signed anything that week. There was no way he could have held a pen steady enough to make a signature that looked this real, this complete. But there it was. His name in his handwriting, on a document that gave Tara complete control of his entire estate. My heart dropped into my stomach. It felt like I was falling without hitting the ground. How was this possible? How had she done this? "He signed everything before he died," Tara said, and her voice was so confident, so certain, that for a moment I almost believed her. "I kept it safe. Your dad wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. I'll prove it if I have to." I looked at the signature again. It looked real. It sounded real when she said it. But I knew my father. I knew what a week in the hospital did to him. And I knew, in a place deeper than logic, that something about this was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong yet. I tried to confront Tara. I tried to tell the family that something wasn't right. But the moment I opened my mouth, Tara's face changed. Her expression shifted into something wounded and betrayed. "You're accusing me of forging documents," she said, her voice shaking with what sounded like genuine hurt. "After everything I did for your father. After I sat with him in the hospital, brought him meals, took care of him when nobody else would." The family members in the room started exchanging looks. I could see the doubt appearing in their eyes. Suddenly I was the bad guy. I was the ungrateful daughter who was attacking her father's loyal cousin. I was the one being unreasonable. "I'm not accusing you," I tried to explain. "I'm just saying that Dad was unconscious." "You were never around," Tara interrupted, and her voice turned cold beneath the hurt. "You worked all the time. Your dad felt abandoned. He told me that. He said he wanted someone he could trust. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My cousins nodded. My uncle frowned at me in disappointment. I felt outnumbered, silenced, trapped in a story that had nothing to do with the truth. Later that night, I overheard Tara on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was low and satisfied. It's done. She can't undo any of it. Nobody's going to believe her over me. My blood ran cold. It was the voice of someone who'd planned everything perfectly. Going back to my corporate office felt strange. The world had moved on while mine had stopped. People smiled at me and said they were sorry about my dad. They patted my shoulder. They offered me coffee. But nothing looked the same to me anymore. I made it until Wednesday before I broke.